Story 1. We find it disgusting that people before the Black Plague dumped trash in the streets and that we would dump trash into our oceans. Story 2. Breathing dirty air. Humans used to tolerate dirty water, but they learned. We are now tolerating dirty air. I thought the COVID-19 pandemic would change that. Numerous studies highlight the benefits of cleaning the air, but we have not learned. One day we will have to learn. Installing air filters in classrooms has surprisingly large educational benefits. A $1,000 investment can raise a class's test scores by as much as reducing class size by a third. Note that this study was conducted before the COVID-19 pandemic. Story 3. Assuming humans are still alive at this point, a few thoughts come to mind. Our scientists knew about climate change, but politicians ran successfully for office calling it a hoax. Some artificial intelligence programs advocate for the death or enslavement of humans, but we continued to advance artificial intelligence development anyway. Wars over religion are still a reality. We were aware of the dangers of plastic pollution and continued to dump it into the oceans regardless. The nuclear arms race persists. Assuming this doesn't lead to our extinction in 500 years, the number of near misses would be alarming. Story 4. Probably how we treat the environment, such as pollution and deforestation. They will look back and wonder how we allowed it to get so bad when we knew better. Story 5. Knowingly destroying the environment and destabilizing the climate results in a far less hospitable world. Story 6. Plastic. In the future, we will discuss it like we discuss asbestos today. We stored food in plastic containers, water bottles, candy wrappers, plates, and cups. In the future, people will wonder why we used it. Didn't we know it caused cancer and always breaks down, entering our bodies? And we will respond, yes, but nothing changed for a long time. Story 7. Chemotherapy. I hope it seems as horrifying as leeches and bloodletting, and that we have a much better cure for cancer. Story 8. Probably eating meat. With lab-grown meat on the horizon, the concept of butchering a cow for steak may become revolting to future generations. Story 9. The belief that wealthy individuals hold more importance than others, and that people reject the scientific method in favor of a belief in literal magic. Story 10. Knowingly destroying the environment and destabilizing the climate results in a far less hospitable world. Story 11. I cannot imagine responding to this because I find it challenging to comprehend how people thought and lived in the 1500s. Therefore, I cannot envision what life would be like in 2500. Story 12. Our denial of the impact of mental health on every aspect of life leads us to prioritize emotionally abusive jobs over seeking help. We then wonder why the suicide rate is soaring and why crime and addiction are so prevalent. Story 13. It is alarming how easy it is to become permanently disabled, and there are no good substitutes if you lose essential functions like hearing or sight. Teeth are the only function where replacement caps or implants are nearly as good as the originals and do not look unattractive. Story 14. We used personal vehicles for trivial purposes like going for a coffee run, idling with the air conditioning and music, thinking it was good for the engine and trying to look cool. Story 15. Chemotherapy can make us feel very ill. Additionally, we should focus on how we treat mental illness. I hope that in the future, there will be imaging or blood tests to determine which psychiatric medication to prescribe. Story 16. Homelessness is one of the most significant problems we have created for ourselves. Millions of people are living in misery because society chooses to spend more money to keep them homeless than to provide a decent, safe place to live for everyone. It is a tragic situation. Story 17. 1. Sending immigrants to detention centers. 2. Denying gender-affirming care to transgender individuals. 3. The death penalty. 4. Trying minors as adults. Story 18. Chemotherapy is currently the best option in many cases and has saved numerous lives. But the idea that we had no better option than to poison ourselves may seem laughable and horrifying in the future. One of my best friends died because he underwent the most aggressive chemotherapy treatments possible. There really wasn't any other option, so I am not criticizing the situation or saying chemotherapy doesn't work. It does. He had a wife and 2 sons, and he really fought hard. In the end, he needed a feeding tube replaced because he was too weak, and his esophagus and trachea were too swollen to eat or drink. The doctors informed him that he would not wake up from the anesthesia due to his weakened state. He looked emaciated with gray skin over bone, devoid of fat or muscle. With no other option, he entered hospice and ultimately starved to death. Ultimately, cancer is to blame, but technically, chemotherapy contributed to his death. Given a different, less destructive alternative, he may have lived a little longer. Story 19. The massive-scale cruelty of industrial farming will one day be viewed as a dark chapter in history when all meat and dairy can be profitably produced in labs. Before any assumptions are made, I want to clarify that I am not vegan. I am simply being realistic. Story 20. I guess everything we do to other humans, animals, and the planet contributes to suffering and destruction. Story 21. Probably factory farming. I feel that future generations will look back and be horrified at how we treated animals for food. Story 22. Until recently in human history, fabric was expensive, and having a garment made for you was an investment. Speaking from a perspective over 200 years ago, the cost of fabric was significantly higher than the cost of labor to have it made. Garments, instead of being discarded after going out of style, would undergo alterations to remain fashionable or to make repairs. When a garment became too worn, it would be made into rags or sent to paper manufacturers to have the fibers turned into paper. If people from that time saw how we dispose of clothes and waste fabric today, they would likely be appalled. Story 23. A portion of the population cannot verbally define what a woman is. They know the definition, but they are unwilling to admit it. I am fully prepared for the permanent ban. Story 24. Flying, talking on the phone, watching television, taking pictures, and undergoing surgery are just a few examples of activities we engage in. Story 25. I find it amusing how everyone in this discussion seems to optimistically believe that we will be living in a technologically and socially advanced society in 500 years. The United States has chosen to regress, prioritizing revenge and anger while ignoring global climate change. Unfortunately, we have the power to make a significant and irreversible impact. My prediction is that people from 500 years in the future will know little about our lives today, but if they did, they would be horrified that women had rights or that we attempted to care for people with disabilities. We have chosen the dark ages instead of a future like that of science fiction. Story 26. The richest and most advanced country in the world wasted any opportunity to combat climate change because of greed. Story 27. Raising animals for meat production is becoming increasingly obsolete. We are close to achieving lab-grown meat, to the extent that traditional meat producers are feeling threatened and are attempting to legislate against it. The transition is inevitable, and the economics will ultimately favor lab-grown alternatives. Story 28. Wait, so they had a way to prevent these children from dying, and they just chose not to? The specifics could include school shootings, hunger, and measles. The list is depressingly long. Story 29. Torturing and killing animals, such as on factory farms, for entertainment is a moral issue. We will view it in the future as we view slavery, genocide, and other atrocities committed against those who are different. Story 30. Tattoos. Not long ago, they were associated with working women and sailors, and before that, with paganism, not to mention the decline of religion in primarily former Christian areas since then. Story 31. 40 hours or more working per week. I think we will go to 32 hours a week. Many people already do this, and I will also make that change within the next couple of years. Story 32. Eating meat. I am not a vegetarian, but I am fairly certain that in the future, meat will be grown in a lab to prevent the cruel treatment of animals. People will look back on us as barbarians, just as we look back on our ancestors and judge them for not being as civilized and enlightened as we consider ourselves today. Story 33. Eating animals for meat, burning oil and coal for energy when the sun exists, and inhaling smoke for pleasure. Story 34. Rebreathing other people's indoor air and pathogens all day and pretending it's not directly analogous to drinking untreated water. Story 35. Toilet tissue is a bathroom staple. I do not know the year it was introduced, but I remember reading that Europeans were disgusted by the Chinese use of toilet paper. Story 36. accepting time off requests being denied, declining life-saving medical care due to insurance denials, working 40 hours a week, having meat with almost every meal. Story 37. People 500 years ago would be horrified that we willingly broadcast our entire lives just to show a day in the life of someone. Free real estate, I guess. Story 38. Your assumption that our species, or any species for that matter, will still exist by then is optimistic. I am not sure most complex life on Earth is going to be sustainable for that long. Story 39. Much of this was discussed by Arthur C. Clarke decades ago. He assumed that as technology and science advanced, people would become smarter and wiser. I suppose he hoped to have some company at some point. Story 40. I am going to be futuristically optimistic and say that waiting until symptoms are severely bad to be diagnosed with any disorder or illness will be a thing of the past. Hopefully, preventative care will advance enough to catch health issues very early, with full body scans becoming common. Some people will have these scans in their homes, some workplaces will install them, and there will be affordable places anyone can visit for checkups if not free. I suspect that many aspects of healthcare will become unthinkable in the future. For example, using donated blood and body parts instead of those created in a laboratory. Additionally, I hope there are things that will horrify people living 500 years from now, such as racism, hate, willful ignorance, and war. Assuming there are still people then, I hope their knowledge of our history isn't lost when they have to evacuate the planet. Story 41. Hopefully, circumcision will become less common much sooner than 500 years from now. I have been against it since I learned what it was at 9. I have been fully restored since I was 17, but I am currently 36 and very upset that it is still practiced. Thankfully, it is no longer the norm in Canada, but 25% is still too high, and I worry about the uncomfortable conversations that arise when someone I know is pregnant. Story 42. 500 years from now? We don't even have a clear idea of how society might look. Perhaps we have transitioned to a post-biological state, where the prospect of dying of old age would be utterly horrifying. Maybe we have reverted to extreme religious practices, and accepting people who do not share the same beliefs would be seen as heresy. It is also possible that corporatism has taken over, making the concept of workers going on strike unimaginable. Alternatively, we could have achieved full socialism or communism, where the idea of people dying from hunger or being homeless is unthinkable. Human society evolves too rapidly to predict. For instance, in just 100 years, Germany transformed from an absolute monarchy that welcomed Jews and was one of the few countries not openly discriminating against them, to a democracy where being gay was accepted for a time, then to a fascist dictatorship that perceived most people as inferior and sought to eliminate the undesirables, including Jews, from the face of the earth. Eventually, Germany split into a social market democracy and a socialist facade of democracy, which granted women equal rights. Up until 1962, women could not open a bank account in West Germany without a man vouching for them. The country then reformed into a democracy once more, with a strong emphasis on protecting Jews. All this occurred within just a 100-year span for a single country. And you wonder what society in 500 years will be like. Story 43. If technology does not suffer any major setbacks, the nature of privacy as we understand it will seem alien and strange in the distant future. As the saying goes, the arc of time bends toward progress. As social acceptance for every non-destructive lifestyle grows, people will want to find their community more easily and earlier in life. Rapid advancements in data collection and processing will reach a tipping point where convenience will feel all-encompassing and present everywhere. Everything and everyone you desire will be available before you are entirely aware of your desires. Consumers in the future will wonder why we ever concealed things from one another if it only meant we could be our authentic selves or had to risk hurting others for the sake of appearances. Story 44. I hope cancer treatment advances to the point where using chemotherapy and radiation seems as outdated as bloodletting. Story 45. I believe that eating animals is questionable. I am not a vegetarian, but I think that someday our future grandchildren will consider us savages for consuming sentient beings. Story 46. Death from conditions like pancreatic cancer. as well as from driving gasoline-powered vehicles and inhaling pollution due to it, contributes to health issues. Microplastics are another concern. Story 47. With medical advancements happening all the time, I've often wondered if people will say, "I can't believe they used to treat cancer with radiation and toxic chemicals." Story 48. It is not the only factor, but my prediction is that giving birth may become less popular in the future. Lab-grown, genetically engineered children could be a reality in 500 years. Story 49. Shaking hands, using doorknobs, and burning fossil fuels. That's assuming we haven't destroyed ourselves by then. Story 50. Slavery. We often discuss how wrong slavery was and how we must apologize for it. Hopefully, 500 years from now, people will judge our hypocrisy in condemning actions from centuries ago as utterly evil while allowing nearly 50 million individuals to live as slaves today as horrifying. We cannot claim that we do not consider it normal. For example, when the European Union attempts to create laws to combat slavery and child labor, they are threatened by Qatar with the cessation of gas deliveries if those laws are enforced. Story 51. Eating sugar, the root of many human health issues, is traced back to concentrated sugar. Story 52. If you haven't listened to Dan Carlson's hardcore history episode, Wrath of the Khans, you should definitely do so. He discusses how the value of life is relative to time. It was truly interesting, in my opinion. Story 53. In less than 100 years from now, people are going to laugh that we worked 40 hours a week and wondered what drained the life out of us. Story 54. Our so-called work-life balance means that we work to barely survive and are constantly stressed and depressed. Story 55. We put anchovies on pizza and eat them instead of keeping our robots permanently lubricated with their oil. Story 56. The number of misinformed individuals who voted for such an incompetent leader as Donald Trump is astonishing. Story 57. People project their own values onto hypothetically smarter and superior future humans who will definitely agree with them. Story 58. I believe that 500 years from now, people will find it unbelievable that we wasted so many natural resources without much thought. Activities like using water guns for fun or filling pools with water may seem irresponsible when future generations could struggle to find drinkable water. Story 59. After reading the comments, I believe the following. Our quality of life and standards for treating humans are significantly higher than they were 500 years ago. Story 60. Hopefully, the idea that you work as much as possible throughout your 45-year career just to retire in your later years, where you are likely to face serious health issues or deplete your entire life savings in a nursing home, is reconsidered. Story 61. No one has mentioned caffeine. Aside from the energy boost, it causes a range of effects on your body, especially in the long term. Story 62. I can't believe those people built a system that normalized children living in poverty and starvation so that a very select few could live in luxury. Story 63. Gender-affirming operations. We will learn why gender dysphoria exists and address it instead of perpetuating it. Everything related to mental health. Story 64. Almost everything. People in the future will look back at us and consider us as barbaric as we consider our ancestors. We're only pretending to be civilized. Story 65. Slicing your face to rearrange it and then sewing it back up. Walking around bandaged and swollen for months to look prettier. Story 66. Chemotherapy and radiation therapy will be viewed with the same combination of horror, abhorrence, and amazement as we today regard the practice of bloodletting and the use of leeches as legitimate medical treatment. Story 67. What does one know about their great-great-grandparents? Great-grandparents? Grandparents? Every human being is a personal library that carries more information than any other person can record or remember. No one knows us while we are here, let alone when we are gone. Children are always in their parents' hearts, but parents are seldom in their children's hearts. Such is life. Story 68. Not allowing children to get tattoos while permitting self-mutilation does not make sense, regardless of political beliefs. Story 69. Slaughtering and eating animals. Assuming that lab-grown meat continues to improve, future humans will not need to use animals for meat anymore. Story 70. allowing billionaires to undermine the beneficial services governments provide for everyone so they can pay less of the money they will never spend on taxes. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.